The evening sun cast long shadows across the polished floors of Westfield University as Maya Collins pushed her cleaning cart down the empty hallway. The wheels squeaked slightly, a sound that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat after 7 years of working as a custodian. Most of the professors and students had already left for the day, leaving the grand buildings quiet except for the occasional echo of her movements. Maya liked this time of day. The solitude gave her space to think while her hands worked automatically, emptying trash bins, wiping down surfaces, and mopping floors. At 32, she had the kind of face that people often overlooked, not because she wasn't pretty, but because she had perfected the art of blending into the background. Her dark hair was always tied back in a practical ponytail, and her uniform, though clean and pressed, was deliberately unmemorable. As she entered the mathematics department, Maya's steps slowed slightly. This was always her favorite section to clean. She enjoyed looking at the complicated equations that professors often left on their whiteboards. While others might see meaningless scribbles, Maya saw beautiful patterns and elegant solutions. Back in her small apartment across town, Maya's teenage daughter Lily was probably already heating up the dinner Maya had prepared that morning before leaving for work. The thought made her smile. Lily was smart, truly smart, and Maya was determined that her daughter would have the chances she never did. What nobody at the university knew, not her supervisor, not the professors who barely glanced her way, not even Lily, was that behind Maya's quiet demeanor lay an extraordinary gift. From a very young age, she had been able to see numbers differently than most people. Where others struggled with basic algebra, complex equations unfolded in her mind like blooming flowers, each step naturally leading to the next. As a child, Maya had amazed her elementary school teachers, solving difficult problems without writing down the steps. "How did you get that answer?" They would ask, and Maya would struggle to explain that the numbers just spoke to her, rearranging themselves until the solution became obvious. By 12, she was secretly working through advanced calculus textbooks borrowed from the local library. But life had other plans for her brilliant mind. When Maya was 16, her mother fell seriously ill. With no other family to help and bills piling up, Maya dropped out of high school to work full-time. Her dream of college scholarships and mathematics research dissolved like morning mist under the harsh sun of necessity. Now, as she wiped down the large whiteboard in Lecture Hall 3, her eyes caught on a particularly difficult equation left behind. It was part of a proof about nonlinear dynamics, a fascinating field that Maya had been reading about in a textbook she'd found discarded in a university dumpster last semester. Without thinking, she stepped back, tilting her head slightly as she considered the problem. There was an elegance to it, but also a mistake in the third line that would make the solution impossible. The professor had been trying to force a conventional approach when a different method would work much better. Maya glanced around the empty room, then picked up a dry erase marker. Just for a moment, she allowed herself to be what she might have been, not a woman in a custodian's uniform, but a mathematician. Her hand moved confidently across the board, numbers and symbols flowing from her fingers like water. In her mind, the solution was as clear as a mountain stream, each step naturally leading to the next. When she finished, she stepped back and admired her work. There was a simple beauty to the completed proof that made her heart ache with a familiar mixture of joy and regret. For just a few minutes, she had stepped back into that other life, the one where her gift wasn't hidden away like a shameful secret. The sound of a door opening startled her back to reality. Quickly, Maya set down the marker and turned to grab her cleaning supplies. She had to finish her rounds before the night supervisor checked on her progress. Tomorrow, someone would erase her work without ever knowing who had solved the problem, and Maya would go back to being invisible. But for tonight, as she pushed her cart toward the next classroom, there was a small smile on her face. They might not see her, but her numbers, her beautiful patterns, had left their mark. In that small way, the real Maya Collins existed in the world, even if no one knew her name. Professor Richard Harrington walked through the university halls with the confident stride of someone who knew his worth. Students pressed themselves against the walls to make way for him, their voices dropping to whispers as he passed. It wasn't just respect they showed, it was fear. "Good morning, Professor Harrington," called out a young teaching assistant, clutching a stack of papers to her chest. Harrington barely nodded in response. Since returning from Stockholm last month with the Fields Medal, often called the Nobel Prize of Mathematics, hanging around his neck, he found it even harder to bother with the social niceties that most people seem to need. His office was the largest in the mathematics department, a perk he had demanded when other universities tried to lure him away with better offers. Bookshelves lined every wall, filled with texts in multiple languages. His own published works occupied a special shelf behind his desk, positioned so visitors couldn't miss them. Hanging his expensive coat on the rack, Harrington sat down at his desk and frowned at the stack of student papers waiting for his attention. Teaching was, in his opinion, a necessary evil that took time away from his real work. But even he had to admit that occasionally, very occasionally, a student showed a spark of something interesting. There was a knock at his door, and without waiting for a response, the university president walked in. "Richard, good to see you settling back in after your triumph in Stockholm," said President Chen, taking a seat without being invited. "Thank you," Harrington replied shortly. "Was there something specific you needed?" The president's smile tightened slightly. "Yes, actually. I've been reviewing the student evaluations from last semester." Harrington raised an eyebrow. And they're concerning, Richard. Your failure rate is 3 times higher than any other professor in the department. Students are transferring out of your classes in record numbers." "Good," Harrington said, leaning back in his chair. "If they can't handle the material, they don't belong in advanced mathematics." President Chen sighed. "The university values academic rigor, but we also value effective teaching. Your approaches are, well, students describe them as unnecessarily complex and intimidating." "Mathematics is complex," Harrington countered. "I won't dumb it down for students who aren't prepared to work at this level." "Nobody's asking you to lower your standards," President Chen said carefully. "But perhaps you could consider making your teaching more accessible." The word hung in the air like an insult. Harrington's face flushed slightly. "Accessible," he repeated, almost spitting the word. "You want me to hold their hands? Draw pretty pictures instead of proper equations." The president stood up, recognizing a lost cause when he saw one. "Just think about it, Richard. We value your brilliance, but brilliant ideas need to be communicated effectively to have impact." After the president left, Harrington sat fuming at his desk. Who was Chen to question his teaching methods? The man had a background in educational administration, not pure mathematics. He couldn't possibly understand the level of precision and rigor required. Later that afternoon, Harrington stood before his graduate seminar, writing a series of complex equations across the whiteboard. The silence in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. 20 faces stared at him with a mixture of confusion and dread. "This," he said, tapping the board with his marker, "is a relatively simple approach to nonlinear dynamics. If you've done the reading I assigned, you should be able to follow along without difficulty." A brave student in the front row raised her hand. "Professor, I think there might be an error in the third line." Harrington turned slowly, fixing her with an icy stare. "An error? Really? Please, enlighten us all." The student's face reddened as she stammered through her explanation. Halfway through, Harrington cut her off. "What you're demonstrating is exactly why so many of you are struggling. You're not thinking deeply enough. You're taking shortcuts instead of truly understanding the underlying principles." As the class ended and students filed out with slumped shoulders, Harrington remained at the board, studying his work. Something about that third line bothered him now. Could there actually have been a mistake? No, impossible. He erased the board with sharp, angry movements. Tomorrow he would give them a problem no one in the class could solve, something to remind them all exactly why he had a Fields Medal and they were still struggling through basic theory. That would silence the whispers about his teaching style once and for all. The clock on the wall read 7:15 p.m. as Maya pushed her cleaning cart into Lecture Hall 5. Most of the building was empty now, just the way she liked it. The quiet gave her space to think while her hands worked through the familiar motions of emptying trash cans and wiping down surfaces. This particular classroom was her last stop for the evening. She always saved Professor Harrington's room for last, not because she liked him, but because she enjoyed looking at the complex math problems he often left on the whiteboard. Tonight was no exception. The board was covered with a particularly challenging differential equation that filled the entire space. Maya leaned her mop against the wall and approached the board, her eyes moving quickly over the symbols and numbers. She could tell by the eraser marks and crossed-out sections that whoever had been working on this had struggled. Probably the graduate students from the afternoon seminar she'd seen leaving earlier, their faces tight with frustration. "That's not right," she whispered to herself, spotting an error in the approach. The equation was attempting to solve a problem related to wave propagation in nonlinear systems, something Maya had read about in an old textbook she'd found in a free pile outside the university bookstore. Without thinking, she picked up a marker from the tray. Just a small correction, she told herself. No one would know who did it. Her hand moved confidently across the board, erasing a section of work and replacing it with a cleaner, more elegant solution. The numbers and symbols flowed naturally as she worked, her mind fully engaged with the puzzle. So absorbed was Maya in her work that she didn't hear the classroom door open. She didn't notice the tall figure standing in the doorway, watching her with growing amazement as she worked through the equation without hesitation, adding her own innovative approach in the corner of the board. It was only when she stepped back to admire her work that she sensed someone else in the room. Maya spun around, the marker still clutched in her hand. Professor Harrington stood frozen, his forgotten briefcase now dangling loosely from his fingers. His eyes moved from Maya's face to the whiteboard and back again, his expression shifting from shock to disbelief to suspicion. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice cut through the silence like a knife. The marker slipped from Maya's fingers, clattering to the floor. "I'm sorry," she stammered, backing away from the board. "I was just cleaning. I didn't mean." "You didn't mean to solve a differential equation that my best graduate students couldn't crack." Harrington stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Who put you up to this? Was it Professor Zhang from Applied Mathematics? Is this some kind of prank?" No, nothing like that," Maya said, her heart pounding. She grabbed her cleaning supplies, desperate to escape the situation. "I just saw a mistake and—" "A mistake?" Harrington's voice rose. "You're telling me that you, He glanced at her uniform. "A custodian found a mistake in my work." Maya's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She should have known better than to touch the board. Now she might lose her job, and then what would happen to Lily's college fund? "I really should finish my rounds," she said quietly, trying to move around him toward her cart. But Professor Harrington wasn't about to let her go. He turned to study the board more carefully, his eyes moving methodically over the equations. Maya used this moment to gather her cleaning supplies, hoping to slip away before he turned his attention back to her. "This approach," he said slowly, pointing to the corner where Maya had added her solution. "This is unconventional, but it works." He turned back to face her, eyes narrowed with suspicion. "How did you know to try this method?" Maya clutched her cleaning cloth tightly. "Lucky guess?" she offered weakly. "No," Harrington said, stepping closer. "This isn't luck or copying. This is understanding." His voice held a strange mix of disbelief and reluctant respect. "Who are you really?" "Just Maya," she replied softly. "I really need to finish my work now." As she hurriedly pushed her cart toward the door, Harrington called after her. "This conversation isn't over, Maya. Not by a long shot." The way he said her name, like it was a puzzle he was determined to solve, sent a chill down her spine. As the door closed behind her, Maya knew that her carefully constructed life was about to change, whether she wanted it to or not. The next day moved too quickly for Maya's comfort. She had spent a restless night worrying about her encounter with Professor Harrington. Would he report her to the cleaning supervisor? Would she lose her job for touching the whiteboard? These questions chased each other around her mind as she went through her morning routine, making breakfast for Lily before sending her off to school. "You okay, Mom?" Lily had asked, noticing the dark circles under her mother's eyes. "You seem worried about something." "Just tired," Maya had replied with a forced smile. "Nothing to worry about." But as she pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway of the mathematics building that evening, Maya's stomach was tied in knots. She had decided to change her cleaning route, saving Professor Harrington's classroom for another staff member. Maybe if she avoided him for a few days, he would forget about what happened. She was carefully backing her cart out of a supply closet when a voice directly behind her made her jump. "I've been looking for you." Maya turned slowly to face Professor Harrington. He was not alone. Behind him stood 3 graduate students, watching with curious expressions. "I need to clean the East Wing tonight," Maya said quietly, trying to move her cart around him. Harrington stepped sideways, blocking her path. "That can wait. I have something more important for you to do." His voice wasn't angry, as she had expected. Instead, he sounded almost excited. "Professor, I'm really sorry about yesterday. I shouldn't have touched the board." "Follow me," he interrupted, turning toward his classroom. It wasn't a request, it was a command. The graduate students parted to let her pass, their eyes following her with undisguised curiosity. Maya reluctantly pushed her cart after the professor, her heart hammering in her chest. Inside the classroom, Harrington had cleared the whiteboard except for a single complex equation written in the center. It looked fresh, the markers still uncapped on the metal tray below. "My colleagues think I'm wasting my time," Harrington announced, addressing both Maya and the students who had followed them in. "They think what I saw yesterday was a fluke. Perhaps you copied something you'd seen before, or maybe I imagined the whole thing." Maya stayed at the floor, wishing it would open up and swallow her. "So," Harrington continued, picking up a marker and holding it out to her, "I created this problem just this morning. No one has seen it except for the people in this room." One of the graduate students, a young man with glasses, cleared his throat. "Professor, with all due respect, this seems unnecessary. Surely the custodial staff has work to do and—" "Be quiet, Thomas," Harrington snapped without looking at him. His eyes remained fixed on Maya. "If you're so clever," he said with a challenging smile, "prove it wasn't a fluke." The room fell silent. Maya could feel everyone's eyes on her. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. Who did this man think he was, putting her on display like some circus act? She should refuse, walk out, report him for harassment. But something inside her, the part that had been silent for so long, wanted this chance. Wanted to show what she could do, even if it was under these humiliating circumstances. With a trembling hand, Maya took the marker. As she approached the board, she heard whispers from the graduate students. "Is he serious? This is cruel. She's going to embarrass herself." Maya took a deep breath and studied the problem. It was a variation on a stochastic differential equation, complex, but not beyond her abilities. For a moment, the room around her faded away. There was only the problem, the numbers talking to her in their secret language. Her hand moved to the board, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. The marker squeaked against the smooth surface as symbols and numbers flowed from her mind to the board. She worked methodically, finding an elegant path through the mathematical maze Harrington had created. Behind her, the whispers died away, replaced by a stunned silence. When Maya finished, she stepped back, suddenly aware again of the eyes on her. She had solved the problem, not only solved it but found a shortcut that made the solution more elegant than it might otherwise have been. She turned to face Harrington, expecting to see anger or disbelief. Instead, his expression was one of genuine amazement. "That's not the approach I would have taken," he said slowly. "It's better." The graduate students were staring at her with open mouths. Thomas pushed his glasses up his nose nervously, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Who taught you this?" Harrington demanded. "Where did you study?" Maya capped the marker and placed it carefully on the tray. "Nobody taught me," she said quietly. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I have floors to mop." By the next morning, the story had spread through the mathematics department like wildfire. Maya could feel the stares as she emptied trash cans and cleaned bathrooms. Professors who had never noticed her before suddenly looked up when she entered their offices. A few even smiled or nodded, which was more acknowledgement than she'd received in all her years working at the university. During her lunch break, Maya sat alone on a bench outside, away from the curious eyes. She unwrapped her sandwich and tried to ignore the knot of anxiety in her stomach. This attention was exactly what she had avoided for years. "Mind if I join you?" Maya looked up to see an older woman in a colorful scarf standing beside the bench. Professor Wong was one of the few faculty members who had always been kind to the cleaning staff, learning their names and thanking them for their work. "Of course," Maya said, moving her lunch bag to make room. Professor Wong sat down with a sigh. beautiful day, she said, looking up at the clear blue sky. After a moment of comfortable silence, she added, "So, you're the talk of the department today." Maya stared at her half-eaten sandwich. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Trouble?" Professor Wong laughed softly. "My dear, you've caused quite the opposite. Richard Harrington has been impossible to work with since winning that medal. Seeing him humbled a bit has improved department morale considerably." Despite herself, Maya smiled. "But that's not why I wanted to talk to you," Professor Wong continued. "I'm curious about your background. How did you learn advanced mathematics?" Maya hesitated. She rarely spoke about her past, but something about the professor's gentle manner made her want to share. "My fourth-grade teacher noticed I was good with numbers," she began. "She gave me extra problems, then older textbooks. By the time I was 12, I was working through college-level material on my own." "Self-taught," Professor Wong murmured. "Remarkable." "I had to drop out of high school when my mother got sick," Maya continued. "But I kept learning. Library books, free online courses, old textbooks I found at yard sales." Before Professor Wong could respond, a shadow fell across them. Professor Harrington stood there, his tall figure blocking the sun. "Professor Wong," he nodded curtly. "I need to speak with Maya, alone." Professor Wong patted Maya's hand and stood up. "Think about what I said," she told Maya, though they hadn't actually discussed anything specific. With a pointed look at Harrington, she walked away. Harrington took her place on the bench, sitting stiffly with his hands on his knees. Up close, Maya noticed the dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept well. "I've been researching you," he said without preamble. Maya's stomach tightened. "Researching me?" "Your employment records, your background." "There's not much there. No college education, not even a high school diploma." He frowned. "It doesn't make sense." "What doesn't make sense?" Maya asked, though she knew what he meant. "Your abilities." He gestured vaguely toward his head. "People don't just understand advanced mathematics without formal training. It's impossible." Maya almost laughed. "Clearly it's not impossible since here I am." Harrington looked startled at her response, then his expression softened slightly. "Yes, here you are." He hesitated. "I showed your solution to several colleagues." They were impressed. Coming from him, it sounded like the highest praise possible. "I have a proposal for you," he continued. "I want to work with you, mentor you, help you develop your talent properly." Maya blinked in surprise. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted mopping floors," he said bluntly. "With proper guidance, you could contribute something meaningful to the field." The words stung, though Maya knew he hadn't meant them to. As if her life now, raising her daughter, keeping their small home clean and safe, wasn't meaningful. "I'm not interested in being your project," she said quietly, gathering her lunch things. "Or your proof that you can spot talent others missed." "That's not what this is about," Harrington protested, but his uncomfortable expression suggested she wasn't entirely wrong. "I have to get back to work," Maya said, standing up. "My supervisor will wonder where I am." As she walked away, she could feel his eyes on her back. Part of her, a part she thought she had buried long ago, wanted to turn around to accept his offer, to finally use her mind the way it was meant to be used. But another part remembered all the years of doors closed in her face because she didn't have the right background, the right education, the right connections. The mathematics world had never wanted her before. Why should she believe it wanted her now? Maya tried to return to her normal routine in the days that followed, but nothing felt normal anymore. She cleaned the same classrooms, emptied the same trash cans, and mopped the same floors, yet everything had changed. People noticed her now. Some professors nodded hello. Graduate students whispered when she passed. Even her supervisor had pulled her aside to ask if everything was okay. "Just fine," Maya had assured him, though in truth, she felt like a deer caught in headlights, frozen between two possible futures, one safe and familiar, the other unknown and frightening. One evening, as she cleaned the graduate student lounge, she overheard an excited conversation from a group huddled around a table covered with papers and laptops. "It's the biggest mathematics event of the year," a young woman was saying, her voice animated. "Teams from all over the world are submitting solutions. The prize money is huge." Not that any of us have a chance of winning, another student sighed. This problem has stumped everyone for decades. Even Harrington is stuck on it. Maya kept her head down, methodically wiping tables on the other side of the room, but her ears perked up at the mention of a famous unsolved problem. "Can I see it?" she asked before she could stop herself. The students turned, startled to realize they weren't alone. There was an awkward pause before the young woman, the same one who had been in Harrington's classroom during Maya's impromptu test, pushed a paper across the table. "You're her, aren't you?" The cleaning lady who solved Harrington's equation. Maya nodded, uncomfortable with the attention but too curious about the problem to walk away. She picked up the paper and studied it carefully. It was beautiful, a complex pattern of relationships dealing with prime numbers and their distribution. Maya felt that familiar tingle in her mind, the one she got when looking at an elegant mathematical puzzle. Unlike the problems Harrington had posed, this one was deeper, more fundamental. It asked questions about the very nature of numbers themselves. "Can I make a copy of this?" she asked quietly. The students exchanged glances. "Sure," the young woman said finally. "Though I doubt." She stopped herself, looking embarrassed. Maya didn't need her to finish the sentence. "Though I doubt you'll get anywhere with it when the best mathematicians in the world have failed." That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Maya spread the problem out on their small kitchen table. She made herself a cup of tea and settled in, letting the numbers speak to her. Hours passed as she filled page after page with calculations, crossing out dead ends and circling promising paths. For the next 3 days, Maya lived in two worlds. During the day, she cleaned the university as always. But during breaks, at lunch, and deep into each night, her mind worked on the problem. She saw patterns emerging, connections that weren't obvious at first glance. On the second night, she had a breakthrough that made her hands shake with excitement. By the third night, she knew she was close to a complete solution. On that third night, Lily found her mother still at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, surrounded by papers covered in equations. "Mom." Lily stood in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What are you doing?" Maya looked up, momentarily disoriented, pulled back from the world of pure mathematics to the reality of their small apartment. "Just some puzzles, honey," she said softly. "Go back to bed." Lily came closer, peering at the papers. "This doesn't look like puzzles. It looks like really hard math." Maya hesitated, then decided it was time for honesty. "It is math. Very difficult math that a lot of people have tried to solve." "And you are solving it?" Lily asked, her voice filled with surprise and something else, a dawning respect that made Maya's heart ache. Had her daughter never seen this side of her? "I think so," Maya admitted. "I'm close." Lily studied her mother's face for a long moment. "Why didn't you ever tell me you could do stuff like this?" Maya reached out to touch her daughter's cheek. "It didn't seem important. It wasn't the life I had." "But it could be," Lily said with the simple clarity of youth. "Couldn't it?" The question hung in the air between them, challenging and hopeful. The next morning, Maya finished her solution. She reviewed it carefully, checking each step, each logical progression. It was correct. She knew it with the same certainty that she knew her own name. With trembling hands, she made a clean copy, placed it in an envelope, and wrote "Mathematics Department" on the front. Before she could change her mind, she slipped the envelope through the mail slot at the department office door. Maya didn't sign her name. She wasn't ready for that yet. But as she walked away, her steps were lighter than they had been in years. 3 days after Maya slipped her solution through the mail slot, the mathematics department exploded with excitement. She heard the news from other cleaning staff. An enormous solution to the famous unsolved problem had been submitted, and the top professors couldn't stop talking about it. The approach was revolutionary, elegant in its simplicity yet profound in its implications. Maya kept her head down and continued her work, a small smile playing on her lips as she listened to the buzz around her. She felt a strange mix of pride and fear, pride in what she had accomplished, fear of what might happen if people discovered she was behind it. She was mopping the hallway outside the department's main conference room when Professor Harrington burst through the doors, his face flushed with excitement. When he spotted Maya, he stopped abruptly. "You," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Come with me." Maya's heart pounded as she followed him back into the conference room. Inside, several professors sat around a large table covered with papers, copies of her solution. Professor Wong was there too, a knowing smile on her face. "Close the door," Harrington instructed. When Maya had done so, he picked up one of the papers from the table. "Do you know what this is?" Maya nodded slowly. "The solution to the Riemann problem." "The anonymous solution," he corrected. "That has the entire department in an uproar." He studied her face intently. "A solution that uses the exact same approach you used on my whiteboard last week." The room fell silent. Maya could feel everyone watching her, waiting. "It was you, wasn't it?" Professor Wong asked gently. Maya took a deep breath. There was no point denying it now. "Yes." The room erupted in exclamations. Questions flew at her from all directions. "How did you figure it out? Where did you learn this approach? Do you realize what this means?" Harrington raised his hand for silence. When the room quieted, he looked at Maya with a new expression, genuine respect. "I owe you an apology," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "I assumed someone with your background couldn't possibly understand mathematics at this level. I was wrong." Maya blinked in surprise. An apology was the last thing she had expected. "The university wants to offer you a full scholarship," Professor Wong announced, stepping forward, "to complete your formal education in whatever path you choose." Maya's mind raced. A scholarship? A chance to finally study mathematics properly. It seemed too good to be true. "What about my job?" she asked. "My daughter?" "We can arrange flexible classes around your schedule," Professor Wong assured her. "And there's a stipend included that should help with living expenses." Maya thought of all the years she had spent hiding her abilities, believing there was no place in the academic world for someone like her. She thought of Lily finding her at the kitchen table, surrounded by equations, and the look of newfound respect in her daughter's eyes. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course," Professor Wong agreed. "But don't think too long. Talent like yours is rare." 6 months later, Maya stood at the podium in the university's largest lecture hall. The room was packed with students, professors, and even some reporters from scientific journals. At the back, Lily sat with a proud smile on her face, recording the moment on her phone. "The relationship between prime numbers has fascinated mathematicians for centuries," Maya began, her voice growing stronger with each word. The nervousness she had felt earlier was fading, replaced by the pure joy of sharing mathematics with others who understood its beauty. In the front row, Professor Harrington nodded encouragingly. Their relationship had evolved into something neither of them had expected, a partnership of equals. He had helped her navigate the formal aspects of academic mathematics, while she had shown him new ways of looking at old problems. They had co-authored 2 papers already, with more in the works. As Maya explained her approach to solving the famous problem, she could see understanding dawn on the faces watching her. This was what she had been born to do, not just solve problems in isolation, but share the elegance and beauty of mathematics with others. Later, as the audience gave her a standing ovation, Maya caught Lily's eye. Her daughter was applauding the loudest of all, tears of pride streaming down her face. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Maya still had years of formal education to complete, papers to publish, and a career to build. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't walking the path alone or in secret. She had stepped into the light, bringing her gift with her. As the applause continued, Maya thought of the cleaning cart she had pushed for so many years. It had been an honest job that had supported her family when they needed it most. She would never be ashamed of that work. But now finally, her mind was free to soar where it had always belonged, among the stars of mathematical discovery.